Hello, and welcome back to the Psycholegal Pop Podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about popular culture through the lens of an attorney and a therapist. I'm Tess Brigham. I'm the therapist.
And I'm Brooke Brigham. I'm the attorney.
So today we are covering a podcast. This is a 4-part podcast from Tortoise Media called Luckyboy. And Brooke we're going to give a brief synopsis of the story. But we're mainly going to then talk about some big themes that come up and so on.
Yeah. So I found this synopsis. Interestingly, this is from the it's called the New Indian Express, which I guess is an outlet in India. But I find it interesting how other cultures and countries, like how they speak about things.
Mm-hmm.
This thing, it just kind of caught my attention. Okay. So it's the innocent time of the 80s. A young, attractive chemistry teacher, Miss Sally Ann Bowen, joins a boys' school. All the 900 plus schoolboys are filled with joy, but the 14-year-old Gareth, a pseudonym, becomes the lucky boy. The teenage schoolboy falls in love with Miss Bowen. Sounds like an underage, lighthearted school drama, except it's more serious than that. Tortoise Media's new investigative podcast series, Lucky Boy, is about Gareth, now in his early 50s, remembering his quote-unquote first love, a 27-year-old young flirtatious teacher fancied by every boy. He still remembers her with some warmth. Boys from this time think of him as the lucky boy, and so did Gareth. In fact, up until his 40s, he was proud of his first love, but something triggers this lucky boy, who is now the father of a 14-year-old himself. Tortoise's new 4-part podcast series follows the story of him recalling and at times understanding his childhood. Was he dating or groomed? Was it about him being a lucky boy or an actual victim of abuse? Narrated by ex-BBC reporter Chloe Hajimatho, the series carefully and empathically treads into ideas like who is allowed to be a victim and a perpetrator, and if abuse perpetrated by a young, beautiful woman really is abuse, why are we so dismissive when the sexual abuse victim is male? Memory is an elusive thing. Hajimatho interestingly weaves this aspect into the series, where almost everyone involved, except Gareth, does not recall any of this. Moreover, the peppy background music captures the tone of the series, set in the 1980s. The setting also gives us a sense of time, when child abuse was a new idea in the U.S. and pedophile activists were a thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So what were your thoughts about it high level?
Gosh, how do I summarize my thoughts? I mean, it's very thought-provoking because, this, this really is in America anyway. Well, this didn't even happen in America, but, there is this stereotype of, the hot teacher and, remember the Van Halen video?
Yeah, hot for teacher.
Hot for teacher.
Everyone loves that drum solo.
Yeah, and it's always been this trope that if a young boy can get together with an older woman, like that's great, but if it's a young woman and an older man, then that's not. And the thing is that it is. I imagine that the boys probably enjoy it more. They're probably more enjoy. Well, I shouldn't say that. I think what both boys and girls enjoy is the attention, and the boys probably enjoy the sex more than the girls. But the reality is, these are children, whether they're male or female. They are children. This is so just unnatural, not right. And these adults who do this are abusing their power. Especially when they're teachers and positions of authority, whatever it is. So, this has been a thing for a long time. And it's like, finally, someone's coming out and saying, or presenting this stories. And the only thing that you can conclude from this story is that this was a horrible experience.
Mm-hmm.
You know, overall, I mean, maybe he was enjoying it at the time, but it certainly ruined a lot of his life.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we hear from his mother, we hear from his sister. And his sister described him as being fossilized, that he is frozen in time.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's married. He, I guess this woman that he married had children from a previous relationship. So he's a father, and, but the problem now, but the thing is that it's interesting the way she said that, almost like he's been frozen. So even though maybe he's growing up, getting older, maybe doing adult things, he is still very much stuck in that place as a teenager. Because I can imagine, well, let me back up for a second. So we learn very early on that he doesn't work because of mental health issues, that he's struggling. And it sounds a little bit like even before he had this aha moment of realizing what happened to him, I think he was struggling. I think he's always been struggling. That was his sister's perception of it. And I can see and understand. So anyway.
Well, the way that this woman, Chloe, came upon him is it her husband went to the same school, or no, I don't know, a friend of hers,
because she knew some of these people. Like she knew some of these because she was at a girls' school, I guess, around that same place, same time.
So someone, was trying to. So Gareth, he is trying to, in like this, I think it's like 2023 when they had this. Some tribunal about some who regulated teachers. He actually was trying to. He did bring a case against her, like a complaint, because he found out that she had been teaching all these years, even though they had the school where he went to this school. This is like he's basically like in middle school when this starts. And
this is Christ College, which is
Finchley or something. That's Christ College. Finchley.
An all boys school.
Yeah. So he, when the teacher left the school, they were told that she would never teach again. Well, then she went on to teach for 35, 40 more years.
Yeah.
He finds out somehow that she's still teaching. And so he brings this complaint against her. So he's looking for witnesses. He's looking for people to corroborate what he's saying. And if anyone else was, had any information. So this request of his came through a couple people down to this producer. And that's how she got involved. And then she started talking to him. And, a lot of the podcasts is like the recordings of their telephone calls.
Yes. That's a good summary.
Yeah. So I don't even know I don't know how I went off on that tangent, but
yeah. So let's go back to Gareth. And so what did you think of him? Because at times I had trouble listening to him. He felt so angry. I mean, it's heartbreaking in many ways listening to him. I don't know what your take was on him.
Yeah. I mean, he's very angry. I mean, he would have to be to keep doing and pursuing this, like all these years later. I don't know if they don't really go really deep into his mental health. I mean, yeah, they say that he has such mental health struggles that he can't work. He's kind of consumed by this, but by this hearing or whatever that they're going to have. And he sounds very like this is his main focus and very angry. Yeah.
Yeah. When I think about him, I can't imagine what it's like for him today to wrap his brain around all of this, because if you think about it, he had this perception or version of what he thought his life was, or what his childhood was, what his life is. It's happened so early, it does affect everything that comes after it. So here was this guy who thought I was in love with this woman and I was such a lucky boy and this was my great love. And then to slowly realize wait a second, this person that I've loved all these years, that I have these warm memories of, or, was actually an abuser, abused me and took advantage of me. And just sort of all of it. And how, when he learns that there may be other boys, that he's jealous.
Yeah.
He feels jealous. He's like, I feel like my girlfriend's been, And then realizing, oh, wait a second, not only was I abused by this woman and she took advantage of me, I wasn't the only one. I wasn't even special. I wasn't even that. So, and now he's wrestling with it. And then realizing, wait a second, the school didn't take care of me. Hold on a second. All of these people in my life that tried to care for me, that should be focusing and caring for me, aren't and didn't.
Yeah. Because in part of this investigation, Chloe contacts, people who used to work at the school. And there was this one guy who wrote her back this very, terse, matter of fact, letter about, I think he was an instructor there, or had something to do with the administration or something. And he wrote her back basically saying, oh, this absolutely didn't happen. And it's like, well, how do you know? And it was the men, all the men who she was trying to question about, these things, even though she had already talked to a couple people who said, yeah, like this happened to me. This is what she did. So that was interesting. And just a lot of the details about how they weren't exactly careful about when they would meet. I mean, for a long time, they met in public. Like she took him to pubs and where other teachers were. Yeah. She took him, there was this one place, they called it the cafe, where she took him and other boys and was like, they're like touching each other and fondling each other, like in a booth or something, like in this cafe. And there's other people in there. She took him to her flat, and I'm sure people saw him coming and going. And he claims that her roommate, he never saw any of her roommates, or, they never saw him. But I don't know. I don't think we can trust his memory of a lot of this stuff, because he's focused on, I'm going to go be with her. How do you know that one of the roommates wasn't home? Yeah. I mean, she was doing it like so just blatantly just out there.
Yeah. I mean, it was very, and so then, I guess his parents had gotten divorced, Gareth's parents. He's one of 4, 2 sisters and a brother. And, his mom is working all the time, but his brother gets wind of what's going on and goes to the mom and says, Mom, something's going on. She confronts Gareth. Gareth's like, no, nothing's going on. Totally lying to her. And then she goes to the school and she has a conversation with that same guy that you were talking about, the administrator. He's like, he's one of these teachers that also is like the head of boys or something, like one of these, I teach this class and I'm part of this, who I think also was a bit of a counselor, because Gareth remembers having, or a guidance counselor, like remembers meeting with him afterwards. And that administrator asked him, is there anything else you want to talk about? Like, never brought it up, but almost sort of a little bit like, will you bring this up? So the mother went to this administrator. He totally just dismissed her and treated her like she had no idea what was going on. Gareth was denying it. She was in this weird place of like, I'm a single mom of 4 kids. You know what I mean?
She's working like 3 jobs.
Yeah. It's like, okay, maybe, I mean, because she had noticed this is the thing. People noticed there was a difference with him when this all started. Something shifted, something changed in him. And I guess his siblings and his mom noticed that and saw it. And that guy just totally blew her off and said that they would get rid of her. And then the mom found out, no, you didn't get rid of her, and all of it. So that's also part of this too, is that his mom was trying to protect him. His mom was trying to intervene. She was being lied to by, Gareth, obviously, because he's a kid, but he was being she was being lied to by this school that is supposed to protect him and to protect their students.
And they just got rid of her. And then she was clearly able to just go on to another school. This was not on her permanent record, apparently.
Yeah, she's like a Catholic priest.
Exactly. Just moved from school to school. She's taught at least 14 more schools by the time he catches up with her, all these years later.
Yeah, that's the whole thing is this TRA, Teaching Regulation Agency that oversees the profession, that basically, said she can never teach again, took away her license, said she can never teach again. The thing is that, yeah, it's pretty devastating, but she's 60 something.
She's ready to retire.
Yeah, she was going to retire in a couple years.
Yeah.
So that's the other part of it too and then you have to ask, so by this administration not doing anything, how many other victims are there? How many other boys did she abuse? And yeah.
Because if this was a male teacher and it was teenage girls, I mean, I would think that it would be treated very differently. Although I don't know, this is the 80s. It's so weird because, the 80s was like 40 years ago, 40 something years ago. And, that's when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And so but I know in my high school, there were things in my junior high school, even.
Oh.
In my junior high school, there was a woman who was a teacher's aide or something, and she was very attractive. And there was a boy in my class who, this is like 7th or 8th grade, who was very, very, very mature looking. I mean, he had like a full beard. Okay, he had like a full mustache and beard, like looked way, way older. Didn't look like he was in 8th grade. And there were rumors that they were doing stuff. They would walk around the school together.
Wow.
Like just walk, like when she would be out on the, doing her yard duty or whatever it is. He'd be out there with her every day, like just, following her around. And yeah, I'm pretty sure something was happening there. And then in my high school, actually, someone who, I was pretty good friends with, was having an affair with like the football coach.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah. So
was the football coach married? You say affair or?
I want to say that maybe he was going through a divorce.
I'm not saying any of this makes it better or worse. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I don't really remember.
Was he a lot older?
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't that old, but he was probably, I think this was, maybe he was in his like late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah, okay.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Around 30. So, I don't know how I got off on this tangent either, but but nothing was done to those teachers. And if all the students knew that this was going, that the faculty, the word gets around.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of looking the other way because.
Yeah, because it's, yeah. Well, I think it sort of goes back to, I wrote this question down, which is, I don't know if this was from an article I was reading about the podcast or not, but it's this question of, if it felt good, is it abuse? Do you know what I mean? And I think this is the crux of this, of why it's so hard to believe, because obviously in order to have sex, the male needs to be excited. There needs to be, so that needs to happen in order for sex to happen. So the belief is that, well, he was excited, he wanted it, and he felt those feelings. And the thing is that the reality is, for girls, they have those same feelings. They have the same things. It doesn't mean that you might have some sort of feeling, but that doesn't mean that it's not abuse, that it's not, that it's not wrong. But that's a big, I think that with Gareth's situation, that's where that seems to be this line that, that people seem to have a hard time really getting, which is, even though he felt like he loved her, even though he, he was an active participant, and even though it felt good, still doesn't mean that it was okay.
Yeah. And, Gareth did say that he said that she was into like some really kinky things, which he didn't realize were kinky things because he'd never had sex before.
Mm-hmm.
Like he said, I just thought that's what sex was.
Mm.
And it wasn't until later that he realized that no, most women like don't want this, or this isn't, the norm. And so he came out of it with this skewed idea of, because he's thinking, yeah, he doesn't know any different. So
Yeah. And that is very much right when we see children acting out and doing things that you're kind of like, where would you get that from? Like, where would that even come to you? Or that phrasing, right? Or these sexualized things that you stop and you start to pay attention. And one thing that he was saying was after Miss Bowen, quote unquote, left the school, he was devastated. But then a couple of years later, like he's trying to kind of be a typical teenage boy and he's trying to date. But he's like, but I'm not where all these other boys and girls are.
Right.
For him, right, he was like, well, kiss. And then you're having full blown sex at 14. He wasn't thinking like, oh, okay, I hold her hand and then maybe we'll kiss and then maybe this will happen. And then maybe in a couple years, maybe something more. But like he didn't know what to expect.
Yeah, it's going 0 to 100.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So you don't remember, do you remember anything like this ever happening like when you were in school?
No, people did not tell me I was not a cool person. People wanted to tell me anything that was going on, but no. I certainly remember back in middle school and high school, like teachers who were really inappropriate, just, I remember I had a science teacher that was real touchy. You know what I mean? Like in today's world, never would have happened. And every year he took all of his students out to some kind of like party out in the woods at the end of the school year. I remember thinking like, this is so weird. And you're letting this weirdo like take us all on a trip to the park. It was just, the whole thing was very odd. He was very odd. And then I just remember teachers who just didn't, just like would say things to you rude across the room, humiliate you. Like I've had a few of those kinds of things that you're just like, so awful. And trust me, these teachers would have been fired in the world that we live in today. And that's one of the things that makes me crazy, if I can go on a tangent for a second, about sort of the culture that we live in now and how people are like, ugh, all these woke people, and there's so many rules and pronouns and da-da-da-da-da. And there's a little bit of, we're holding people accountable to do the right thing, to be a teacher who does not touch someone inappropriate, to be a teacher who does not humiliate someone, doesn't
misgender somebody,
who treats people with respect.
Yeah.
That's what we want. And it's this attitude. And that's that whole thing of like, oh, back in the day, it was so much better. Or, is it better or worse?
No,
like,
it was bad.
It wasn't.
No.
We were just kind of left to our own devices to figure this stuff out. And I'm sure stuff like this happened in school. I just didn't know about it. I'm sure many more things happened.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I mean, this happens, God, I feel like so often. How many stories do you read in the paper every day? Just about, and these are just the ones we know about. So, I think this is a real problem. And one of the themes in this, podcast was kind of like, what do they talk about? Like child abuse in many ways used to be, I don't know if tolerated is the right word, but almost tolerated. Like people were not outraged by a lot of stuff. And that's how they got away with it. This whole thing about how boys couldn't really be victims. I mean, that was alive and well for sure.
Oh, yeah.
In the 80s, 90s, and beyond. Like if a guy came forward and was complaining about having sex with, this good looking teacher, everyone would be like, what are you complaining about?
Yeah.
Lucky boy. That's the whole point of the title.
Yeah.
That's what people would say.
And what was, I think, very surprising was how many of those same boys 40 years later still have that same attitude. And it was interesting because she was talking about how there were these Facebook groups or WhatsApp groups where all the boys, talked and like group chats, that kind of thing. And she started making the rounds, like reaching out to people. And she was talking about how many people said, no, I don't want to talk about it. I don't remember. But there was one guy who, like, he really cared about this. And he was the one that responded. But if you think about how many people she reached out to,
no one
only one. And that's the other part of it too. It's 40 years later. What are you worried about?
Right.
But so it's either, again, you 40 years later, still unwilling to get involved. You're still unwilling to, say anything, right? Like, and a good chunk of them are still in the same headspace that they were in 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing too is, Gareth was kind of known as sort of a kid that was like struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that factored into some things too, right? Where he wasn't necessarily believed, or, the way he was perceived was a little different. And maybe that's why she focused on him.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds a little bit like she was grooming a lot of boys.
Yes.
She was grooming a lot of boys and then seeing which ones took the bait.
Yeah, no, I think that happens with male and female perpetrators. They look for kids who are struggling, and maybe they don't have their parents are not paying attention, and that's the thing. Like, sometimes I wonder why, like, with all this stuff, like, I think, like, with our family, people in our community knew, like, our family, our parents, they knew our dad was a lawyer. They weren't going to fuck with us. You know what I mean? Like, there is no way.
Yeah.
I think, they do. They single out people who no one's going to believe them if they tell. Yeah. They don't have parents who are around all the time to be watching out for them. I'm not blaming the parents. I mean, it's not this woman's fault. She has to work 3 jobs to support her children. But, that's what they look for.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, what was I going to say? So one of the other big themes was this, how we perceive female perpetrators and male perpetrators, that male perpetrators are seen as sicko or gross or awful. Oh, he's terrible. And we villainize them, rightly so. But with women, we see them as like that they're sex mad, that they're addicts, they're a sex addict. She's sexy. And also the other part of this too is, especially if the woman is good looking, there's almost this feeling of, if she's good looking, if she's attractive, then, she's some sex starved, temptress. And one of the things that Chloe mentioned was that, and still to this day, sex for a teenage boy is seen as an achievement.
Right.
Right. With girls, it goes back and forth. Right. Sometimes there's a lot of pressure and sometimes there isn't. But with boys, I do think there's a lot of pressure with sex to have this milestone, to have someone who, is going to let you have sex with them, that kind of thing. And one of the other things she mentions is the belief that, sex for teenage boys is an achievement, and that they're also immune to emotional harm. That almost this idea of that sex for boys that are teenagers, it's not about that there's no emotional connection, that it's all just sex and a transaction. For women, it's seen much more as a connection. And I think what this is really saying and exploring and talking about is the fact that no, it is serious for them, that it is, they have feelings. They are people. Just like, we all have feelings. And no matter what it is, again, you have varying feelings towards the people that you have sex with in different relationships, but that it's still emotional, no matter, who you are, what the circumstances are.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. 'Cause he was definitely the way he talked about her and how they would their routine and all of it. Yeah, it was very much like that was his girlfriend.
Yeah.
He looked forward to that, every day going back to her flat after school and, all the stuff that, clearly that was his girlfriend.
Psych Legal Pop will be back after these messages. Well, and also it shows up when after she leaves, people would make comments about Miss Bowen, and he got into a bunch of fights. Fights in the sense of, this is my girlfriend. Like, he was pissed. How dare you talk about her in any negative way at all? That should tell you a lot. Like, just how devastated he was when she did leave, because it was very abrupt. It was, and that's the other thing too, was this adult was coming in, made this child fall in love with her, and then was like, okay, peace out, bye. Gotta go. I'm out of here. And that sort of, right, for a 14, he was 15 at the time, but like a 15-year-old, that emotional pull and how devastating that is. And then he's walking around thinking this is his great love girlfriend, and he's beating up anybody that would say anything different.
Yeah. Yeah, and his life was just consumed by this. So in the meantime, he's not doing well in school. I'm sure he's not. I can't remember did he end up like, well, whatever, did he end up going to college, or what was his profession? I can't even remember if they even.
Yeah, you know what? It was mentioned like in the first few lines of the podcast. But I do believe, I remember her saying something to the effect of that he dropped out by 16. I think things have been rough. That's one thing, is I would have loved to hear a bit more about like what was his life,
this affected,
how this affected him, all of that. I think another part of this, because I went on Reddit and was reading sort of comments from people. People were annoyed that they felt like there wasn't enough detail, that it left with a lot of questions. And my guess would be is I think that they worked very hard to protect Gareth's privacy.
Yeah.
And, that Gareth's not his real name, and nobody's real names were used. And maybe there was some concern.
Real name? Is that the teacher's real name?
Yeah, because she got in trouble. I mean, they could put it out there.
It's on the record, yeah.
It's on the record. So this is the thing, is that, what was I going to say? Oh my God, I just forgot.
On Reddit, someone was saying that they didn't get enough detail.
Not enough detail, sorry. And so I was thinking, okay, maybe they're not telling us anything about his life from 15 to 50, because that would maybe
to protect his privacy.
But she just gave us some broad strokes of mental health issues, not working. But I do believe it was, dropped out of school at 16, something like that. It has not been easy. I mean, by any means. And this was another thing that he was talking about, was realizing, as I was saying earlier, that you have this experience at 14, 15, you think you fell in love, you think that, so this is your perception of who you are, how you see yourself. And you spend until you're 40, like, this is who I am. This is how it is. It's almost kind of finding out like your birth parents aren't your birth parents. Like how you saw the world was through this lens, through this way of seeing. And that at 40, then it gets, thrown up. And then one of the things he said was, when he found out about these other boys, was, yes, he was jealous, but also he's like, then I realized she didn't love me. And just that recognition of, wait a second, what I thought to be true about myself, about how I saw myself, how I interacted with the world, all of these things, that's not true.
Yeah, because he describes her as his first love, and was kind of proud of that, and proud that this, beautiful young teacher chose him, until he had that wake up moment, like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
then he sees his son is 14 and he looks at him and he thinks, yeah, I was used. I mean, there's no way that was, love, like romantic love or whatever.
Well, and I think it's in the first episode, one of the reviews that I read sort of poo-pooed this, thought it was pointless, but I thought it was interesting, which is the Chloe, she interviews a bunch of 14-year-olds. Like every day, 14-year-olds. And I thought it was really interesting because I think it helps us see, if you don't have kids, if you don't have a 14-year-old boy in your life, it is hard to think about like what would that be like? And it was really shocking when she was interviewing them. She was asking them questions like, well, what do you do here? And what do you do there? I mean,
are you shaving?
Are you shaving? Are you, what, and like maybe one was, and one kid admitted he still plays with his Legos, I mean, 14 is young, very young.
Yeah. And, even with, our most famous case in the U.S., the Mary Kay Letourneau thing. And, even though, they had kids together, they stayed together. And she died of cancer. I think they stayed together till she died. Although, I mean, that man, really, I mean, he was a saint. Because he was not happy with her. He, at some point, realized that what had happened to him, and he sort of politely acknowledged it, but it was clear that, I mean, he was just such a victim. And, he just, I guess, like kind of stood by her out of loyalty or whatever. But his life was awful. I'm sure he's grateful he has his children or whatever, but it's probably a relief to him at this point that she died.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. Well, think about it. He was 14, 15. He had a kid that he really didn't. Do you know what I mean?
And she started messing with him when he was like 11 or 12.
Yeah.
Like she knew him over a period of years. And
I mean, she had to be grooming him all of those years.
Yeah.
And then, right. And then here he is. Now he's a father. Now he's a father of 2. And he's not even out of high school yet. And it did ruin his life. Again, I think he's grateful for his children, but she took away his youth.
Yeah. She took away any choice. He had no choices anymore. She took all his choices. Yeah. And she purposefully, I think, got pregnant and, obviously wasn't trying not to get pregnant. I mean, she was cuckoo.
Oh God. Do you remember? Because we covered this. I can't remember how long ago it was.
Like at the very beginning. I think it was within one of the first 20 episodes that we did. Like it was very early.
Okay.
Yeah,
but we covered this, and I remember watching this like hour-long 20, 60 minutes interview with the two of them, and it was enlightening. Or no, it was an Australian interview.
Right.
And it was, she was nutty, just nutty, and could not own anything, couldn't be accountable. I mean, of course she can't, because she cannot admit that what she did was wrong. This time, Mary Kay Letourneau.
Didn't her father have a similar thing where he had a very young young mistress or something,
ran or like had a second family, or ran off with a much younger woman who was a student of his because he was a professor.
Yeah.
I mean, that woman, I believe, was legal age,
barely,
but it it's not any better. So one of I think the other part about this is, and I do wonder, I don't know if any studies have been done of what it's like for someone who has a perpetrator that admits that they did this and owns up to it versus one that doesn't. Because I think that the minute Gareth realizes, okay, I was abused, he starts trying to figure out what to do. And he learns in 2020, they're not, the police aren't willing to prosecute, which is how he ended up going to the teachers. What is it? The teacher teaching regulation agency to get some justice. But I think that the other part that I think is so heartbreaking about the story was how he thought his friends, one of his friends, two of his friends would stand up and be by his side and say, yes, we saw all of this. They wouldn't come up. None of the teachers were willing to, even though they're retired, they're much older and they're near retirement. None of them were willing to do it. I guess Miss Bowen had a good friend, a woman that Gareth remembers who knew about this relationship, acknowledged
who was with them when they first started flirting and stuff.
Yeah. And I think Chloe tried to find her and she denied everything and she dismissed it. And I'm so glad he got this last thing of the TRA, that got her license taken away, because I can't imagine just how much he must feel like. Does nobody believe me? Am I not worth believing? Is my pain not important to anybody at all?
Yeah, I know.
And
did that guy that Sanjay, did he remember Gareth?
He remembered Gareth. Gareth didn't remember Sanjay. And so another boy comes forward. This is the only other boy that had any kind of contact with her, that was willing to come forward and talk about it. And he was at this cafe. He remembers the day that this kid, Ben, stole a bunch of porno magazines and brought them into the cafe. And apparently, so Gareth remembers that same situation of Ben stealing the magazines, but he doesn't remember Sanjay at all. But it was very similar in the sense that, like, Sanjay would walk her home and so would Gareth. And again, I think she kissed, she kissed him at one point and then he got out. He was just like, okay, he got away from her.
Oh, good for him.
And then there was someone else that they mentioned. There were a couple boys that were rumored to also be involved. There was some kid that was 16. He was a cricketer and that, but he wouldn't talk on the record because he says he has good memories. So I think that's the other part.
Yeah, he was older. Yeah, it wasn't 18, but I think the age of consent there
16
was 16. Yeah.
Yeah. Still wrong.
That's
but
pretty young.
But I also wonder too, when I was thinking about it, if for, like, let's say this cricketer, this cricket player, right? For him to then admit or like to come on record and say anything about this, then he then has to face what Gareth's facing now, which is, oh, wait a second, I wasn't loved, I wasn't seen, because right, the cricketer has only good memories. And so there's this other part of this too, which is, I think what motivates people not to get involved is, I have a memory of this. This is what I remember. This is what I see. This is good for me. And I'm not willing to look outside, because if I have to look outside of that, I might find something I don't want to find.
Right.
And that seems to be another big theme is no one's willing to look at anything, And I can imagine Gareth really feels like he's out on the ledge somewhere.
Yeah. So then when they get to this 2023, tribunal with the teaching regulation agency, she just denies.
Oh yeah.
Everything. She just denies everything. But then at a certain point, after she was kind of, cross-examined a little bit, she did start to talk in a way. She just kind of went off on this tangent and started to talk in a way that made you feel like, oh, she did do this, but she's kind of rationalizing it as she's going. And it's this sort of stream of consciousness. And it must, they found her, guilty or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
and this was all on video and she was there. And when they found her guilty, I think she just left and got up and left the video. Out. And I think that's very telling. One of the kind of like prosecutors, one of the people that was interviewing her, it was interesting because she was interviewed by the police in 2020. And in 2020, she, I think, told the police, oh, I don't know this Gareth. I don't know him. He's annoying. He's a pest. He's this, he's that. And then when they interview her here, she's like, oh, we were friendly. We were chatty. We were doing this and that. And someone called her on it. Like, well, which one is it? And she went right into this. Oh, I didn't have time to prepare my answers. with the police. There was one person staring at me and another one asking me question after question. It's a little bit like, well, lady, I'm sorry. You were now 60 something or late 50s and you're being questioned. Like, you had the right to go, wait a minute, I want an attorney present or I want something else. Like, that's a lame excuse. It's a really lame excuse. Like, you have the ability to stop and.
Yeah, she just obviously forgot what she had told them.
Well, I think she forgot what she told them. And I think also, right, I think it's a very classic thing of these perpetrators to distance themselves. So he's a pest, he's bad, he's this, he's that. I'm going to push him away. I'm not associated with him at all. I would never do that. And then she's faced with other people corroborating and some other people going, well, you were at the cafe with these boys and this happened and that happened. And, people witnessed that. And then she had to backtrack and say, oh yeah, we were friendly. We were this, again, sort of whatever story she needs to angle it.
Yeah. No, she got caught in a lie. So,
but yeah, she denied absolutely everything. And that for Gareth, I mean, I think that was, I'm sure, rough, really rough to just hear her pretend but his love of his life, this first love denies that any of this was real.
But she's also mentally ill.
Yeah,
so
I know.
What do you expect?
I know. But it's just, I enjoyed this 4 episode thing, and each one's about 35 minutes. And again, yes, I think there was probably stuff missing. It would have been nice to get details on other things, but what his life has been like and all of that. But I do understand that. But I appreciate, I appreciate these kinds of podcasts because it does ask a lot of questions and questions that are worth talking about and discussing, but things that aren't clear-cut answers. And I know people want everything wrapped up in a neat little bow, but I think that it's very thought-provoking, very,
I think it's impossible. I mean, because look, you're dealing with children who, look, nobody's childhood is as they remember it.
Yes.
So you're dealing with adults trying to recall things that happened to them before before their brains are fully formed and talking about these experiences and what they can remember. Memory is a strange thing. And so, we're not going to get and then you're dealing with this, mentally ill woman who's the teacher. And then all these other people who are just they don't want to get involved and they're just trying to protect themselves and their own reputations.
And their own memories. Again, a lot of times people don't want to pull back the curtain because no, it was all good. It was all good.
Yeah, and all the people at the school, who's gonna admit that? Oh yeah,
I knew about it.
We knew about these women, and you're this woman, and no one's going to admit that. So, it's that part is not satisfying, but I think that it was, for Gareth, I mean, this was obviously something he needed to do. Hopefully, he's been able to, move on somewhat in his life, but we don't know. They don't tell us if this whole experience gave him any satisfaction or anything.
This reminds me a bit of the Finding Neverland documentary. Very similar. They were actually a little bit younger, and this is obviously different. This is a male, a celebrity, but that same thing of feeling like I had this special relationship with this special person. This was something, was it love? Was it not? Was it friendship? What was it? But I felt special, seen and heard. And I think that's the other part of it too, which is if you base your whole life on, I was special, seen and heard by this woman, this is what happened, to have all that ripped right out from underneath you, it's rebuilding your identity, your sense of self. Who am I?
Yeah. So. Yeah. Wow. Well, I liked it. I recommend it. It's I kept listening. Yeah. I just wanted to keep, I listened to the whole thing back to back to back. I was like, wanted to find out what's going to happen next. So,
this is the same Tortoise Media. Is the same one that did Sweet Bobby. Remember Sweet Bobby?
Yeah.
That did the Sweet Bobby podcast. And they've done a bunch of other podcasts. So they're really well known, and they're real journalists. So that's the other part of it too, is they're not sitting there. They're not going to sit there and speculate the way we are, speculate for, 20, 30 minutes of an episode about like, well, what do you think's going on here? And what do you think's going on there? Right. Like, and I think that also bothers people, right? That there's,
right.
I think people are used to.
Yeah. It's journalism.
Yeah.
This woman, Chloe Hajamatho, she is an ex-BBC reporter, or investigative reporter, whatever. So, so they are looking for the truth, and you're right. They're not going to speculate. And, she put a lot of work into it. She called a lot of people.
Oh God. Yeah.
She ran into a lot of dead ends, but, she put it all out there and, whatever she could find.
I can't imagine these journalists, these investigative journalists, because she was saying, this is par for the course, right? That this is people don't want to talk to you. People don't want to talk to you. You get used to it. But I can't imagine picking up the phone and being rejected. No, like over and over again. I certainly think it's better for her to do it than Gareth to try to do it. But even still, I can't imagine having this job where you're rejected most of the time.
But in that experience of being rejected, the story kind of tells itself. It's like, clearly no one wants to talk about this. Why? Because people knew about it, and they're not going to now say, oh yeah, I knew about that. I remembered that. So just that act of, confronting all of these people and them all saying, no, I don't want to talk about it. That tells you something.
Yeah. No, you're right.
That's
you're right.
Journalism. Something out of that.
That's very true. And I think at the very end, she sums some things up. Some of the themes that we were talking about today, she talks about all of that, the male versus female and how we see it. And, boys having sex as an achievement and all of those things. So I thought she did a really, really good job of just asking, and asking questions and what does this mean? And I really wonder, kind of, even though we now have all of these expectations of people, to, like you were talking about, the teachers of the 80s could not get away with things that they did and said today in some respects. But I feel like this stuff still happens rampantly in schools. And even, with my daughter in high school, there was, a lot of, like you said, there was inappropriate things happening. There were rumors of things happening. There was a lot happening. This stuff doesn't just go away. I think people just get more clever with, how they approach it. Yeah. And I think that one thing that is very serious about all of this is this may have moved away from, but it's happening online. This is the other part of it is that maybe, we do still read many stories about women, female teachers having sex with their underage pupils. Yes, that is still happening. But I also wonder what's happening online. What is happening? Because I think that this is the other part of it is we tend to dismiss things like, oh, that doesn't even happen anymore. But it's like, no, all of those things that the stranger danger and the things that our parents were telling us about when we were kids, like all of that danger is now moved to this other platform. Yeah. And look, human beings are human beings and human nature is what it is. And so these type of things, these type of perpetrators, they're never going to go away. Yeah. It's always going to be, like I said, I think they just find other ways to approach it and, but still ultimately, I feel like we hear more about women teachers and other, just women, like someone's mom, it's like just, sexually abusing teenage boys. I feel like I hear a story at least once a week, it's some big case on the news. And,
So I feel like we hear about that more than ever. Maybe
Well,
because we just hear more, we have so much media going all the time.
but that was a very common, like you said, Hot for Teacher. There were movies, teen movies out there where there was some older woman, Stifler's mom, from American Pie. I mean, that kid wasn't 18, or maybe he was, I don't know. But the character was a senior in high school. So, these kinds of things were part of the culture and again, seen as like super cool.
Yeah.
Remember that movie with Andrew McCarthy, Class, where he realizes he's sleeping with Rob Lowe's mom? I mean, that's another one that's like, that was a big movie.
Weren't they in high school? They were in like some
they were in something like boarding school. Yeah. And that was high school. And he has an affair with this older woman. And I mean, hello. I mean, again, The Graduate, the character was 22, but
yeah.
So anyway, there always has been this sort of mystique, right? Cuckoo, Mrs. Robinson, like this mystique of the woman that does this. Anyway, I really hope Gareth is getting into a better place and that he's getting the help that he needs and all of that, because I think it's great. He's doing the work. It's never too late. And I do think this is going to help him tremendously. It's just going to be really hard. It has been hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good for him for telling his story.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoy our podcast, there's different ways you can support us. You can go to Apple and give us a rating or a review. Those really do help us. You can subscribe to the podcast, tell a friend or two about the podcast. And then also, if you want even more content from us, you can go check us out on Patreon. Our Patreon is, we have a couple different tiers. You get all the shows ad-free. You get a weekly bonus. And then for our $8 tier, there's more for that. I think that's it. You can follow us on social media at PsychLegalPop. And we're now broadcasting on YouTube. Our not video yet, but it's all the audio is on YouTube.
Yeah.
Not all of it, but we're starting to do it. So it's getting up there.
There's a lot of episodes to upload, but yeah. We're moving into the YouTube realm.
Look at us.
I mean, how many years after it became a thing?
3 years into our podcast and 20 years into YouTube, we're there. But I do have to tell you something interesting, though.
Yes.
So I get, for my website, for my own business, I get this thing every month that's like Google gives me a report of like what people are landing on, what are they searching? And a new search term that's coming up that gets people landing on my website is Brooke and Tess Brigham.
Oh. Yes. Wow. So we're a thing on the internet.
Yes.
On the Google.
On the Googles, we are a thing, but it's really interesting. And that's how they're Googling our names. And then that's what they're landing on my website.
Oh.
But I'm going to add we can talk about this offline, but like, I'm going to add a page to my website for the podcast. So we can talk about all that, but
cross promotion.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks for listening. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.